Skyships over Cashiers.com. Cashiers, North Carolina, the new UFO hotspot. Bringing you investigative reporting, eyewitness accounts, deep throat testimonies, and cosmic messages. Now we'll hear from Robert from Ohio. This is what he shared with Mary Joyce on October 18th, 2016.
Okay, I'm going to tell a little bit about my experiences that happened out there. I spent 4 years in the Air Force. I worked ground control in airplanes. I was a machinist in the Air Force. I worked at the Federal Reserve Bank in Cleveland for a year before I went in, and I'd like to share a little story about when I was at the event that happened to me at Edwards Air Force Base in California in 1971. I had seen an empty hangar that people were going into that was off in the distance. Edwards Air Force Base is set up with the main base. Then they have a north and south base. One of the bases, I couldn't remember if it's north or south, had the U-2 spy planes, and the main base we were testing the SR-71 and the YF-12 Blackbird spy planes and reconnaissance. And we also worked on other advanced aircraft there because it was a test base. We also had underground facilities, I found out. At this base, I had seen people in the mornings going into this one hangar, and I never seen anybody coming out. So I thought my friend, I said, one day go check that out. And till this day, I don't know what happened to him or where he went or anything. It just seemed like it's a blank what happened to this fella. But we went into the hangar, and the hangar was empty. And as we went into the hangar, we looked around, there's nobody there. We thought, well, where'd everybody go? And we saw a stairwell. So we went down the stairwell, and there was like the stairs down and then a turnaround, and it came to a floor with an elevator there, and there was nothing else there, just a small elevator. And we got in the elevator and hit the button, and it shot down like you were on a ride at an amusement park, real fast down. I'm not sure how many hundreds of feet below the ground, but it was several hundreds of feet down. And when the door opened up, underground roads and tunnels were as big that you could have two aircraft side by side each other. I saw an office area, and then I also saw another section where there were saucer-shaped craft. And what happened was I had top secret security clearance, and I thought that I was okay to go down there because I had top secret security clearance. It wasn't until later that I found out that I had stumbled into an area that was considered above top secret, and you had to have a need to know and clearances and these other be approved. So while I was down there, what happened was when the door opened up, when the elevator went down, I looked around and I saw this saucer-shaped craft with windows, and I saw like three pod type landing legs on it, and I had sketches of this, and I had made sketches of this later on. But as I was down there, next thing I know, it just happened so fast that a security police, an MP, had a M16 in my face and then turned the rifle butt to me and said, "What are you doing down here? I'm going to lose my job. We're all going to get discharged from the military. You're not supposed to be here. They're going to say you were never here. You never saw anything." And he told me we didn't have to be down there. And I said, "I have top secret clearance." And he said, "Not for down here, you don't." And then after that happened, he shoved me to this elevator and where I was at, and I felt some kind of electronic device zap my head, and it was like electrical shock. And the next thing I had thought, at first I thought that it was just like it erased my memories. I woke up and thought I was outside my hangar, but then I realized the hangar that we went in, I thought I was outside of it. Then I realized I was in my barracks room. There was magazines scattered all over the room floor. I woke up like in a stupor, like a person that was out drinking, and like I thought, well, what happened to my room? Like somebody ransacked it. So I saw this, and for a long time I didn't talk about this, and I had headaches and wake up with dreams, screaming like someone was pulling me. And I saw these things; they actually happened. And while I was at Edwards, I saw an article that Buzz Aldrin was speaking at the Officers Club, and it was open to the public because he came back from the moon and he was head of the flight test center there for a short time. And so I went to there, and it was people had so many could register to go, and I had met Buzz Aldrin's wife, who was at the Officers Club, and I shared some stories about when we were kids and moved to Florida as a young child, and my mother was passed, and my sister was sick, so we moved, and we lived right on the Indian River, about 5 miles from Cape Canaveral. Now we saw an orange. Before one of the moon missions, we saw an orange glowing object come out of the sky, hover above the Indian River, and then zigzagged and shot back up into the sky, changing from different shades of orange till it disappeared. And I shared that with Buzz Aldrin's wife, and she says, well, wait till I tell you what was on the moon, what Buzz told me about the aliens on the moon and about the crafts and things on the moon. And she shared the story about the saucer-shaped craft and cigar-shaped crafts on the moon. And when Buzz came back, she told me she would let him talk to me. And as Buzz Aldrin got done speaking on the podium and took questions from people, he just talked about the moon mission, and he didn't say anything relevant to ETs or visitors or what was on the moon. And then when his wife said that this fella had stories when he was growing up, and that he saw something out of the sky like you did on the moon, and he was upset because only his wife had a breakdown after he shared some of the things with her, and she also went to drinking, and it caused me to do a lot of that too. And because you got nobody to share these stories with, and the government tries to discredit you and send people to follow you, your phones are bugged, and just all kinds of things happen that are not good for people that try to come forward. But I wanted to share the story, and Buzz Aldrin took me aside in a corner of the area of the Officers Club, and he says, look, I didn't want to say anything about these things, but since my wife had said some things to tell you, he said, when we landed on the moon by one of the edge of the craters, there was 4 cigar-shaped vehicles that were cylindrically shaped, he told me, that were parked side by side each other near this crater. And he told me that one of the ETs spoke to them telepathically, and he told them that when we learn everything about frequencies, electricity, and magnets and magnetism, and these things, we'll learn how to power their crafts. And he said that we had to advance more, and when we advance more, we'll know more about some of the things that they have. And they had a moon base, and he said that the ETs, they had communication with them, and he said there was a moon base that they had there, they had crafts there, and there was so much structure on the moon that that they couldn't take a lot of pictures, and the pictures that they took, they had NASA wipe clean some of the structure and paint over them so people couldn't tell that there was any structure on the moon. But Buzz Aldrin told me that they were first threatened, that he doesn't feel anybody will believe you when you tell them this story or these events, because he said that the government was afraid that people wouldn't believe you, and that if you shared these stories, they threatened to take his pension away and things like this. But he shared the events that were on the moon, about the crafts on the moon base, and the connection that we have with the visitors and ETs, and he said that he was aware of the things that I saw underground, but he didn't want to go any further to talk that. And then to get validation and confirmation with the events that I had shared and talked to, I happened to get orders to go overseas shortly after being underground, so I don't know if it had something to do with they wanted me to get out of there. But I went to Colonel Whitehead, and Colonel Whitehead, he honestly looked like he was he could have been like something that he was aware of everything that I was saying. And when I asked for orders overseas, I didn't get any the first time I went to see him, and the next time I went to see him after this incident, it seemed like I had orders right away to go. And I got orders to go to England and RFK, but in the meantime, I wanted to hop out of LA to go back to Dayton, Ohio, so I could get close to home, so I could see my family before I went overseas, because it was a 2-year assignment. And the plane stopped on a runway. I was out of the backside of LA, where they fly a lot of officers and people, and a 4-passenger Learjet had a plane going to Dayton, right at their base in Ohio. And as I we were ready to board and taxi down the flight line. The plane stopped, and it stopped because a black limousine pulled up, and this officer said to me that just get off the plane and let this fellow sit where he wants to sit. And there was just a Learjet is just like a card table, two people on one side, two on the other. So the captain got out and escorted Dr. Henry Kissinger onto the plane. And as we did our introductions and introduced each other, I was just a young airman in my first year in the Air Force. And after we got above the clouds and we were talking, I asked him if I could ask him a question. And I shared these experiences with Buzz Aldrin about the aliens on the moon and meeting his wife at the officers club. And I told him about the saucer-shaped crest and the threats that I had when I was in the elevator and how they threatened me and told me that I would disappear. They told me that they would discharge me on a medical and discredit me and say that I was never there if I talked. And they said that after they shoved me in the elevator with an M16, I said the rifle button pushed me. They hit my head with something. They zapped my head with some kind of electronic device. I told all this to Kissinger, and how they said I didn't have the need to know about clearances, and I was in a above top secret area, and I saw these roads, and I saw tunnels and everything underground. And Kissinger just looked at me, and he paused for a second, and he says, "After I answer your question, there'll be no more questions." And he said that I won't deny anything that Buzz Aldrin told you or what you saw underground. But you got to remember one thing. He says, when you talk about these things to people, these things will just confuse them, and people aren't ready for this because he says people need structure, people need roads to follow, they need guidelines, they need the Bible, and they need religion, and these things would just confuse them. So it's better. The Rand Corporation says it's better, which was the Rand Corporation was a military think tank, and Dr. Henry Kissinger said it would be best that we didn't talk about things like this until we advanced more, and that was in 1971. And then he says that I won't deny anything that you saw or what Buzz Aldrin told you, but he said when you talk about these kinds of things, you got to remember people will look at you in a different light. Some people might think you're crazy, and other people won't know what to say. But we found out it's best, and they also said that sometimes strange things happen to people, so you have to be careful when you talk about these kind of things. And then that was it. We never shared anything else. He diverted a plane from going to Wright-Patterson in Ohio. You could check out of we had to manifest our schedule, so somewhere there would be to validate my story that Kissinger was at the Rand Corporation 71. He changed the flight plan to go to Oklahoma City because he said he had to see a guy. He bought myself and a captain lunch, and then after he bought us lunch, he went to see the guy in Oklahoma City. He came back, and we taxied into Dulles Airport, and when we landed, they had a bus ticket waiting for me with my name on it, Robert Jacobs, and he said it was a pleasure meeting you, and I exchanged greetings back, Bill and him, that it was a pleasure meeting him, and he had to go to the White House and take care of business, and then that was it. I went on to Cleveland, but since that time, I had these experiences. I would wake up with just feeling somebody pulling my arm and having nightmares for years and these things coming back to me. But after years later, and I had validation of these stories from Dr. Kissinger, I also had a fellow after I got out of the service in 75 that worked at NASA in Cleveland, and he said everything that I described that happened on the moon, he heard the astronauts talking and what they saw, and the moon base up there at the ETs. He heard everything here in Cleveland, but nobody else heard it because they were on a different frequency. And he said to me that that's validation for you, but he couldn't say anything else. And then there was another time my wife and I was visiting her sister outside Area 51 in a state park outside Las Vegas called the Valley of Fire. And we ran into a contractor that him and his wife were working. He was probably close to 70 or around that age area. And I asked him if I could talk to him for a minute because his wife said he worked at Area 51, but they had left and were moving to Utah, and they wanted to take a walk at the park there, the Valley of Fire. And I told him everything that Buzz Aldrin told me in the ride with Kissinger and the underground saucer-shaped craft, and he got really nervous, and he just said I got to head to the car, and his wife said, what's the matter? And I told her that I talked to him about things that I had saw at aircraft and what Buzz Aldrin told me about the moon. And she said, well, if he didn't deny anything, he validated your story. But ever since we left Area 51, he has followed, and his bones are bugged, and he just doesn't sleep nights. Just like me, he can't sleep nights, and he's up at all different hours. Then I met another man from Area 51 that was a contract worked out there, and he said that they do a lot of work out there. They have the Area 51, and there's another area they call Area 52. That's where a lot of the ETs and visitors stay. In that area, they call that area. I forget what they call that to them, but he says they don't only work with the Greys and other visitors there. They also work with IBTs. And I said, what's that? He said that's interdimensional beings that they work out there, and they help them with technology. So then years later, I had so much trouble with this PTSD, with these aliens and things. I told I was just felt ever since all this happened to me, it's just obsessed with me that I gotta have somebody believe me that these things happened, and not they try to discredit me, and the government and people, make you look bad and look foolish, and they do things to you, and they send people to warn you or give you caution. And I wanted to just come forward now because of these events, being up there in age, now 65, I wanted to be able to share my story and my events on what happened. Just like when the ET said, is we learn everything about frequencies and electricity and magnets and magnetism. We'll know how they power their craft. Well, we do that. We learned that since. But I was in Ohio in 2011 taking an exam at the Veterans Facility and Ohio here, and one of the officers that was doing the exam asked about, he says, I heard you had some stories or events that you could share with me about. I shared my events, and I had pictures and sketches of these crafts that I saw underground Edwards, and he asked if I could look at them, and then he never came back. He took these pictures that I made, since 1971, 35, 40 years ago. He asked if he could keep this, and I said, okay, go ahead. I didn't think I would need them for anything. And then he said, do you know about the work we're doing with the ETs in Dulce, New Mexico? And I said, no, I don't. He says, well, we have 8 to 10 stories underground. We share agreements and treaties with the ETs there, and we have tunnels that go from Edwards in California, several facilities underground where we work with the ETs and visitors, and they're entitled to some rights and privileges, and we exchange humans for advances in technology. But he says, nobody will believe you if you share these things. This came right from the mouth of an Air Force medical doctor who told me this and these things. And he even said that you could find these things out later by talking to other people. We've worked for the ETs. And he said Eisenhower signed treaties at Edwards Air Force Base in 1947 and 1954. Eisenhower was one of the first ones that were allowed on one of the alien crafts. And I had come across some pictures of white General Dwight Eisenhower when he was president, shaking hands with the ETs or out front with them. He signed treaties, and they gave us technology, advanced technology, and since then that's how we've been able to progress. And Buzz Aldrin also told me that the ETs were concerned that we weren't advanced, and they said we probably wouldn't be back to the moon until we advance more after we're done with our moon missions. But Buzz Aldrin said that they communicated with the astronauts telepathically. So when I was telling this to the doctor in Ohio at one of the exams, he said, well, you got to always remember when you're around any ETs or visitors, he says, we were always taught just to say in our head mentally, everything's okay, everything's okay, everything's okay, just keep repeating it. So he kind of chuckled, and I kind of chuckled, but I said that's probably the truth. But these experiences have caused me years of trauma, and even the gym where I go about a year and a half ago, I saw 2 men that were staring at me, and I said, what are you guys doing? Oh, nothing. We removed the dents. And I said, what, like in cars? And the fella says, no, we removed the dents like in people. And I said, what do you mean, like in people? And he says, well, you know, we just like when we move the dents in a car, they disappear. He said, well, we do the same thing with people. I says, well, what are you looking at me for? And he says, well, people talk too much about things, and we're just kind of giving you a warning right now that you need to stop talking about some of the things you're talking about. We don't want to come back and see you. And so then I told my wife, if anything happens to me, at least I want to share my story, and that's one of the reasons that I'm connecting with you, Mary, that I can. So these things happen to me. I got a list of people that I talked to. These events have bothered me for years, my whole life. I wanted to share these events because I know there are other people, and there is no paperwork for veterans that are struggling with claims, or veterans that say, where's your paperwork? How can you document it? There isn't any. There's bases underground at Edwards, underneath the Denver, Colorado airport. There's like 10, 12, 13 facilities that probably hold 100,000 people or more underground. You know, years ago they started at the Greenbrier in West Virginia. They went from Edwards Air Force Base up to underneath. They have the fastest trains underground now that ride on above the rails on magnetism power. These trains, they always joking that our train system is so old, but people don't really know that our trains underground are some of the fastest and sleekest trains in the world underground. And they go to the Pentagon, they go to the White House in case there was any danger to find people that they want out of there, like the president or generals or people at the Pentagon. They have facilities that they need. They have information stored on everybody in the world. These facilities were supposed to be for natural disasters like the meteoroid, or if there was a World War III or nuclear disaster. And now these actually turned into underground facilities where a lot of them we work with the ETs. But we're not the only country that works with the ETs. The Russians work with the ETs, Germans, the Chinese, and England, and they work with the ETs, and they've got shared technology. They all have tunnels underground. Underneath Stonehenge, there's underground base and military facilities. China's building all the structures underground, and I was in China in 1990. My interpreter, Mr. Chen, told me that, well, why shouldn't we do it? Everybody in the world has underground facilities. They're storing oil and gas and coal underground. They said we're just copying America, Japan, and England, and they're doing the same things. So we're doing that. But I had the validation from these people in Nevada, people out at Area 51. There's a lot of people. There's underground bases in Tucson. They go up the east coast of Maine. A lot of bases in Arizona. And we are working with the ETs, the visitors, and it's known, but they felt that Kissinger said that the Rand Corporation and Brookings Institute, two military think tanks for the government, said that it's just better to deny everything, then you don't have to explain, and then they won't know what's ours and what's others. But I've run into people that told me that my last assignment when I came back from overseas was Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland, and I met two women from the CIA, one named Linda, one named Joan, and they told me that there's so many black projects going out there, you know, that we had, there was Project Orion, there was Project Blue Book, there was Project Aquarius, there was Project Camelot, there was, I could go on, I had written so many down, a lot of them are named after constellations of the planet, and then there's others that have different names, but Linda and Joan had told me that I became friends with that worked for the CIA. They said that, you know, there's unlimited budget for these black projects, and if you ask too many questions, they said there's people that disappear too.